In this exercise, I want to talk about raster and vector. You may have heard of these terms before, but do you know what they mean? Well, Photoshop is what's referred to as a raster image editor. So what that means, obviously, is he's going to handle all of our raster images. But what the heck is a raster image? Well, check this out. I'm going to start zooming in on this image. And by the way, this image you'll find inside your work files folder. This is barn1 detail.jpg. You're welcome to pop them open and follow along if you like. But really, you'll probably just want to kind of kick back and maybe jot some notes as we go. So what the heck is a raster image? Well, check this out. I'm going to start zooming in on this guy, and I haven't shown you how to zoom yet. I'm going to show you lots of zooming techniques in just a little while, but as I get closer and closer and closer on this image, I start seeing these blocks of color, these large squares of color. Hopefully you can see this on screen. These blocks or squares of color are called pixels. And a raster image is made up or is comprised of millions and millions of these things called pixels, right? Let me zoom in on a different area and hopefully we'll see some different colored pixels. So it looks like grass against a barn wall. We get closer and closer and closer and realize that it's just a bunch of colored blocks. But what happens is as we start zooming out, the human eye starts to blur or blend these blocks of color together until what you and I see is a nice, clean, smooth looking photograph. Okay, so that's how that works. So raster images are comprised of tiny blocks of color called pixels that blur together to create a nice, clean-looking image. Think of them as like mosaic tiles, if you like, or Lego bricks. Okay, so this is what Photoshop is really, really good at working with. Photoshop also has vector editing capabilities, but really a program like Illustrator is much more dedicated to vector graphics. So we have Photoshop for raster and we have Illustrator for vector. Now, it just so happens that I have Adobe Illustrator open in the background with a cartoon alien inside him, and this cartoon alien is a vector graphic. How can I tell? Well, I'm going to start zooming in on this guy, and as I get closer and closer and closer on this guy, we don't see any pixels. All we see are nice, clean, smooth lines. Everywhere we go inside this image, as close as we can get, we're always going to see nice, clean, smooth lines. That's a vector object. So a vector object, rather than being created out of pixels or mosaic tiles, he's actually created out of mathematical lines and curves and shapes and things like this. Thankfully, it's the software, Adobe Illustrator, that's going to be working out all the math for us in the background so you and I can focus on creating and coloring cartoon aliens. Now, something else that I want to bounce off you here. A vector graphic, like we're seeing here, is what's referred to as a resolution-independent graphic. So in other words, he's always going to be top quality. We could take this cartoon alien, we could print him on a t-shirt, we could blow him up to 3 or 4 times his size and print him on a nice big poster, we could shrink him way down and print him on a postcard, whatever we want to do with him. He's always going to be top quality because he's comprised of these mathematical lines and curves, right? Now, on the other side of the coin, we have our photograph inside Photoshop. And raster graphics are what are referred to as resolution-dependent graphics. That means that they're bound by their own quality. They're restricted by their own resolution. And we'll talk more about this in just a little while. Let's say, for instance, this is a 5x7. Well, I can't take a 5x7 and blow it up to an 8x10. Well, I could, but I might lose some quality in the process. I couldn't take a 5x7 and blow it up to, say, 24x36. You can't do that. But I could go in the opposite direction. I could take a large image like an 8x10 or a 24x36 and shrink it way down to maybe a postcard or maybe a 5x7 or a 3x6 or whatever I want, right? If they're low quality, then they will forever remain low quality. If they're high quality, then oftentimes you can make them slightly higher quality and also lower quality. Okay? And again, we'll get into much more detail about this in just a little while. But there you go. That's the bottom line, and that's the difference between raster graphics and vector graphics. Illustrator traditionally is going to handle our vector graphics, and of course Photoshop here is going to handle all of our raster graphics.